The woman beneath the oak tree looked so peaceful that Samuel Kane almost turned his horse around, not wanting to disturb the scene before him. But this was his land. His tree and curiosity got the better of him as he dismounted and walked closer to see what held her attention so completely. It was early September in 1878, and the California heat still lingered in the afternoon air around Angel's Camp. Samuel had ridden out to check on this particular stretch of his property, where an ancient oak stood sentinel over a natural spring that kept the grass green even in the driest months. He had not expected to find anyone here, much less a young woman in a simple blue dress, her auburn hair pinned up loosely, completely absorbed in whatever book rested in her lap. She did not hear his approach, so intent was she on the printed words before her. Samuel took off his hat, running a hand through his dark hair, wondering what to say. He was not a man given to easy conversation with strangers, especially not young women who appeared without warning on his land. At 26, he had spent most of his adult life working this ranch, building it from nothing after his father died, and he had little time for socializing or the niceties that seemed to come so easily to other men. "Excuse me, miss," he said finally, his voice quieter than he intended. She startled, dropping the book into her lap, her hand flying to her chest. Her eyes, he noticed, were the color of honey in sunlight, wide with surprise but not fear. That impressed him somehow. "I am so sorry," she said, already gathering her belongings. "I did not realize this was private property. The tree looked so inviting and I have been walking for hours. I meant no harm." "What are you reading?" The question surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. It was not what he had meant to ask. He had meant to ask what she was doing here, where she had come from, whether she needed assistance getting back to town. She looked down at the book, then back up at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "It is called Middlemark. Have you heard of it?" Samuel shook his head. Books were a luxury he rarely afforded himself, though his mother had taught him to read well enough before she passed. He worked with his hands, with cattle and horses, and the unforgiving California earth. "It is about people trying to find meaning in their lives, making choices that matter," she said, standing now, brushing grass from her skirt. She was tall for a woman, he noticed, probably around 5'7", and she met his gaze directly. "Though I suppose that sounds terribly dull when I put it that way." "I do not think it sounds dull," Samuel said, and he meant it. There was something in the way she spoke about the book, a passion that made even the brief description come alive. "I am Samuel Kane. I own this land." "Olivia Danvers," she replied, extending her hand like a man would. He shook it, surprised again by her directness. "I arrived in Angel's Camp 3 days ago. My uncle owns the general store in town. I have come to help him run it as his wife passed this spring and he is struggling to manage alone." "I am sorry for his loss," Samuel said automatically, then added, "and I am sorry to have interrupted your reading. You are welcome to sit under this tree whenever you like, Miss Danvers. It seems a shame to have disturbed you." "That is very kind of you, Mr. Kane," Olivia said, and her smile reached her eyes this time. "I confess I have never found a more perfect reading spot. The shade is lovely, and the sound of the spring is wonderfully peaceful." Samuel found himself wanting to prolong the conversation, though he could not think of what else to say. He stood there, hat in hand, feeling like a fool. "I should let you get back to your book," he said finally. "If you wait just a moment, I can escort you back to town. It is a long walk, and the sun will be setting soon." Olivia glanced at the book in her hand, then at the tree, and Samuel could see the war playing out across her features. She wanted to stay, wanted to finish whatever chapter she had been reading, but propriety suggested she should accept his offer and return to town before dark. If it is not too much trouble, might I stay just a little longer? She asked. I am at such a crucial part of the story. I promise I will head back before the sun gets too low. Samuel should have said yes, should have mounted his horse and gone about his business. Instead, he heard himself say, "Why do you not finish the chapter, and then I will take you back? I need to check the fence line over that ridge anyway. I can do that and return in, what, half an hour?" That would be perfect, Olivia said, already settling back beneath the tree, her face lighting up in a way that made Samuel's chest feel strangely tight. He rode toward the ridge, but his mind was not on the fence. He kept thinking about Olivia Danvers, about the way she had looked sitting beneath his oak tree, about the passion in her voice when she spoke of her book. He had never met a woman quite like her, so self-possessed and unafraid. Most of the women in Angel's camp were kind enough, but they spoke to him with a certain deference that always made him uncomfortable, as if his owning land made him somehow superior. Olivia had looked at him as an equal, nothing more, nothing less. When he returned, she was standing, the book closed in her hands, a slightly dazed expression on her face. "Did you finish the chapter?" he asked. "I did," she said, "and it was even more heartbreaking than I expected. Would you like to tell me about it on the ride back?" The words were out before he could stop them, and Olivia looked at him with those honey-colored eyes, considering. Then she nodded. "I would like that very much." He helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. It was a long ride back to Angel's camp, but Olivia talked the entire way, telling him about Dorothea and Casaubon, about idealism and disappointment, and the ways people trap themselves through their own choices. Samuel listened, asking questions when she paused, and found himself more engaged than he had been in any conversation he could remember. "You must think me terribly silly," Olivia said as they approached the outskirts of town, going on about fictional people as if they were real. "I think you care deeply about things that matter," Samuel said. "There is nothing silly about that." She turned to look at him over her shoulder, and he saw something shift in her expression, a recognition perhaps, or an acknowledgement of the strange connection that had formed between them in the space of a single afternoon. "Will you come back to the tree?" he asked as he helped her down in front of the general store, a weathered building with a sign that read Danvers Mercantile. "Would you mind if I did? I would be disappointed if you did not." Olivia smiled, really smiled, and Samuel felt that tightness in his chest again. "Then I will be there tomorrow afternoon if the weather holds." She was there the next day, and the day after that. Samuel found excuses to ride out to the oak tree each afternoon, and each time Olivia would read for a while, then tell him about what she had read. Sometimes she would read passages aloud, her voice rising and falling with the emotion of the words, and Samuel would sit and listen, his back against the tree trunk, his eyes closed, letting the story wash over him. After a week, he brought a blanket for her to sit on. After 2 weeks, he brought sandwiches his housekeeper had packed, and they ate together in the shade. After 3 weeks, Olivia finished Middlemarch and started a new book, and Samuel realized he had never been happier. They talked about more than just books. Olivia told him about growing up in Sacramento, about her parents who had died in a cholera outbreak when she was 17, about the loneliness of being shuttled between relatives who did not quite know what to do with an educated young woman who read too much and spoke her mind too freely. Samuel told her about his father, who had worked himself to death building this ranch, about his mother, who had loved poetry and music, and had taught Samuel to appreciate beauty even in the harsh California landscape. "She would have liked you," Samuel said one afternoon in early October, the words slipping out unbidden. Olivia had been reading, but she looked up at that, her bookmark slipping between the pages. What makes you say that? She believed that the best people were the ones who could find wonder in ordinary things. You do that. Every day you find something new to marvel at in those books of yours. And what do you find wonder in, Samuel Kane? Olivia asked, setting the book aside completely now. He looked at her, at the way the dappled sunlight fell across her face, at the intelligence and warmth in her eyes, at the curve of her mouth that he had been trying very hard not to think about. Lately, he said. The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Olivia's breath caught, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging heavy in the space between them. Samuel, she said softly, and his name had never sounded quite like that before, full of tenderness and longing. He moved closer slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. She did not move away. When he kissed her, gentle and questioning, she kissed him back, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like coming home to a place he had never known he was seeking. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia was smiling, her cheeks flushed. "I was wondering when you would do that," she said. "I was trying to be a gentleman." "You are a gentleman," Olivia said, reaching up to touch his face. "That is one of the things I love about you. Love." The word hung between them, enormous and terrifying and wonderful. "Olivia," Samuel said, taking her hand. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks. I know this is fast, probably too fast, but I cannot imagine my days without you anymore. I cannot imagine coming out here and not finding you under this tree. I cannot imagine not hearing about whatever book you are reading, not listening to your thoughts about the world. I do not want to imagine it." "Then do not," Olivia said simply. "I want to court you properly," Samuel continued. "I want to ask your uncle's permission. I want to take you to dinner, to the church socials, to do all the things that respectable people do. But I need you to know that my intentions are serious. I am not a man who plays at affection. When I give my heart, I give it completely." "And have you given your heart, Samuel?" "I have," he said. "To you, if you will have it." Olivia leaned forward and kissed him again, longer this time, deeper, and when she pulled back her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I will have it," she said, "and I give you mine in return." "I love you, Samuel. I think I have loved you since that first day, when you asked what I was reading instead of ordering me off your land." They sat together under the oak tree until the sun began to set, talking about the future, making plans. Samuel would speak to Olivia's uncle that evening. They would court properly for a few months, long enough to satisfy propriety but not so long that Samuel thought he could bear to wait. Then they would marry, and Olivia would come live at the ranch, and they would build a life together. "There is something I need to tell you," Olivia said as Samuel prepared to take her back to town. "My uncle has been wonderful to me, truly, but he has been hinting that he would like me to consider marriage to the banker's son. He thinks it would be a good match, financially secure." Samuel felt his jaw tighten. "And what do you think?" "I think the banker's son is a bore who has never read a book in his life and who looks at me like I am a prize to be won rather than a person to be known," Olivia said firmly. "I think I would rather die a spinster than marry him. But my uncle will not be pleased when I tell him about us. He may not give his permission." "Then we will convince him," Samuel said. "I may not be a banker, but I have a good ranch, a solid income, and I can provide for you well. More than that, I will love you and respect you and never try to dim your light. That has to count for something." Olivia's uncle, Thomas Danvers, was a stout man in his 50s with kind eyes and a shrewd business sense. He listened to Samuel's request with a neutral expression, then asked Olivia to leave the room so he could speak with the young man privately. "You are asking to court my niece," Thomas said once Olivia had reluctantly departed. "May I ask how long you have known her?" "3 weeks, sir," Samuel admitted. I know it is not long, but I am certain of my feelings. And what are your intentions? To marry her if she will have me, to build a life with her, to give her a home and a family and every happiness I can provide. Thomas studied him for a long moment. The banker's son could offer her a very comfortable life, social standing, wealth, connections. With respect, sir, your niece does not strike me as a woman who values those things above all else. A small smile crossed Thomas's face. No, she does not. She is very much like her mother in that regard. My sister married for love, you know. Married a school teacher who never made much money but who adored her until the day they died. They were happy, truly happy. I have often thought that is rarer than we like to admit. Samuel waited, hope rising in his chest. You may court her, Thomas said finally. But I want your word that you will do this properly. No sneaking around, no impropriety. Olivia has suffered enough loss in her life. I will not see her reputation damaged or her heart broken. You have my word, sir. I will honor her in every way. Then you have my permission, though I suspect it would not have mattered much if I had refused. I saw the way she looked at you when she thought I was not watching. That girl has made up her mind, and when a Danvers woman makes up her mind, heaven help anyone who tries to change it. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Samuel's life. He came to town every Sunday to escort Olivia to church, then to dinner at the boarding house. They attended barn dances and harvest festivals, went on chaperoned picnics and evening walks. But their favorite times were still the afternoons under the oak tree, where Olivia would read and Samuel would listen, and they would talk about everything and nothing. What are you reading today? Samuel asked one afternoon in late October, settling beside her on the blanket he now kept in his saddlebag specifically for these occasions. Jane Eyre, Olivia said. Have you heard of it? The one about the governess. You have been paying attention, Olivia said, delighted. Yes, that is the one. I am nearly finished. Just one more chapter. Then read it, Samuel said. I will wait. But as Olivia began to read, Samuel found himself watching her instead of listening to the words. He watched the way her brow furrowed when she reached a tense moment in the story, the way her lips curved when something pleased her, the way she absently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when it fell forward. He thought about waking up next to her every morning, about coming home to her every evening, about building a life that was full of these quiet moments of contentment. He thought about the ring in his pocket. He had bought it 2 weeks ago from a jeweler in Stockton, riding there specifically because he did not want anyone in Angel's camp to know and potentially ruin the surprise. It was a simple gold band with a small sapphire, the blue of it reminding him of the dress Olivia had been wearing that first day. He had been carrying it with him every afternoon, waiting for the right moment. Watching her now, lost in her story, Samuel realized there would never be a more perfect moment than this. This was who Olivia was, who she would always be. A woman who found magic in words, who could lose herself completely in a story, who brought passion and intelligence and joy to everything she touched. And he wanted to spend the rest of his life giving her the peace and security to be exactly who she was. Olivia, he said. She held up one finger, her eyes still on the page. Just one moment. I am almost at the end of this chapter, and it is so beautiful I can hardly stand it. Samuel smiled, settling back to wait. But as he watched her read those final paragraphs, saw her eyes fill with tears at whatever emotional climax the story had reached, he found he could not wait after all. Marry me, he said. Olivia looked up, startled, the book still open in her lap. What? Samuel moved to kneel in front of her, pulling the ring from his pocket. I know you have not finished the chapter. I know I should wait for a more romantic moment, should plan something elaborate and grand. But watching you right now, Seeing how completely you give yourself to the things you love, I cannot wait another moment. I love you, Olivia Danvers. I love your mind and your heart and your spirit. I love the way you see the world, the way you find beauty in stories, the way you make me want to be a better man. Marry me, please. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy. Tears were streaming down Olivia's face now, but she was smiling, that brilliant smile that made Samuel's heart race. Yes, she said. Yes, of course, yes. I would marry you today if I could. Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and longing he had been holding back during their proper courtship. Olivia kissed him back just as fiercely, her book tumbling forgotten onto the blanket. I did not finish the chapter, she said when they finally broke apart, laughing and crying at the same time. You can finish it later, Samuel said. We have all the time in the world now. But Olivia picked up the book, found her place, and held it up so they could both see. Read it with me, she said. I want to share this with you. So Samuel, who had never been much of a reader, read the final paragraphs of Jane Eyre with his future wife. Their heads bent together over the pages, and when they finished, he understood why Olivia loved stories so much. They showed you what was possible. They showed you that happiness could be found even after great sorrow, that love could triumph over circumstance, that two people could build something beautiful together if they were brave enough to try. They were married on a crisp December morning in the small church in Angel's Camp. Olivia wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Samuel wore his best suit, the one he had bought for the occasion, and he thought his heart might burst from his chest when he saw Olivia walking down the aisle toward him. Her uncle gave her away, tears streaming down his weathered face. The ceremony was brief but beautiful, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Olivia like she was the most precious thing in the world, because to him she was. The wedding breakfast was held at the boarding house, with most of the town in attendance. Samuel had worried that people might think their courtship too brief, their marriage too hasty, but he need not have concerned himself. Everyone who saw them together could see the love between them, obvious and true and unshakable. You are a lucky man, Samuel Kane, Thomas Danvers said, shaking his hand. Take care of her. With my life, sir, Samuel promised. As evening fell, Samuel took his bride home to the ranch. He had spent the past weeks preparing for this moment, cleaning the house from top to bottom, buying new curtains and linens, doing everything he could think of to make the place welcoming for Olivia. But he was still nervous as he helped her down from the wagon, wondering if she would find it too rustic, too plain after living in town. Olivia walked through the door and stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Samuel had built a fire in the fireplace, and he had filled every vase he could find with the last of the season's wildflowers. But what had made Olivia gasp was the bookshelf he had built and installed along one wall of the main room. It was rough work, nothing fancy, but it was sturdy and well made with enough shelves to hold hundreds of books. I thought you might want a place for your collection, Samuel said, and room to add to it. Olivia turned to him, fresh tears in her eyes. It is perfect, she said. You are perfect. How did I get so lucky? I am the lucky one, Samuel said, pulling her close. I found you under my tree, remember, the best day of my life. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Olivia's head on Samuel's chest, she said, I never finished that chapter of Jane Eyre, you know. The one I was reading when you proposed. No, Samuel said, running his fingers through her unbound hair. No, you interrupted me at the most crucial moment. Do you regret it? Olivia propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. Not for a single second. Some stories are lovely, but this is better than any story I have ever read. This is real. Read it to me now, Samuel said. Finish the chapter. I want to know how it ends. So Olivia retrieved the book from her trunk, and by the light of a single candle, she read the final chapter of Jane Eyre to her husband. And when she finished, Samuel understood that she had been at the part where Jane returns to Rochester, where love wins despite all obstacles, where two people find their way back to each other and build a life together. A happy ending, he said. The best kind, Olivia agreed, setting the book aside and blowing out the candle. Though I think ours will be even better. She was right. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment, as all marriages are. Olivia had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, so different from the orderly days in town. Samuel had to learn to share his space, his life, his thoughts with another person. But they navigated it together, with patience and humor and a deep well of love that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Olivia transformed the ranch house into a home. She sewed curtains and made preserves, and learned to cook the hearty meals that Samuel needed after long days of work. But Samuel made sure she always had time for her books. He hired a young man from town to help with the ranch work, freeing up his own time so he could spend more of it with his wife. And every afternoon, weather permitting, they would walk out to the oak tree together, and Olivia would read while Samuel listened, just as they had in those early days of courtship. The town grew accustomed to seeing them together, always together, and the love between them became something of a legend in Angel's Camp. Young couples would point to Samuel and Olivia and say, "That is what we want. That is what marriage should be." In the spring of 1880, Olivia told Samuel she was expecting a child. He was beside himself with joy, immediately wanting to wrap her in cotton wool and not let her do anything that might be remotely strenuous. Olivia, practical as ever, laughed at him and continued with her daily routines, though she did allow him to fuss over her more than usual. "What do you hope for?" Olivia asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "A boy or a girl?" "I do not care," Samuel said honestly, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. "As long as you both come through safely, I will be the happiest man alive." "You say that now," Olivia teased, "but if it is a boy, you can teach him about the ranch. If it is a girl, you will have to learn about tea parties and dolls." "Then I will learn about tea parties and dolls," Samuel said, "and I will be the best tea party attendee any little girl ever had." Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1881. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Samuel, pacing in the next room while the doctor and midwife attended Olivia, thought he might lose his mind from fear and helplessness. But when he finally heard the baby's cry, followed by the doctor calling him in, he stumbled into the room to find Olivia exhausted but smiling, holding a red-faced, squalling infant. "Meet your son," she said. Samuel looked down at the tiny creature in his wife's arms and felt his entire world shift. He had thought he knew what love was, had thought his love for Olivia was the deepest feeling he could experience. But this was different, this fierce protective instinct that roared to life the moment he laid eyes on his child. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked. They had discussed names, of course, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Samuel knew exactly what the boy's name should be. "Thomas," he said, "after your uncle, the man who gave me permission to court you." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "He would be so honored. Thomas Samuel Kane. It is perfect." Little Thomas proved to be a healthy, happy baby who nonetheless had powerful lungs and a will to match. Those early months were exhausting, full of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Samuel and Olivia navigated them together, taking turns walking the floor with the baby, supporting each other through the challenges of new parenthood. "I have not finished a book in 3 months," Olivia said one afternoon, looking longingly at the bookshelf as she nursed Thomas. "Read to him," Samuel suggested. "He does not know the difference between a lullaby and literature. Maybe he will grow up loving books as much as his mother does." So Olivia began reading aloud to Thomas, and whether it was the sound of her voice or genuine interest, the baby did seem to calm when she read. Samuel would come in from the fields to find his wife curled up in the rocking chair, Thomas at her breast, reading everything from Shakespeare to the latest novels shipped from San Francisco. As Thomas grew, so did the ranch. Samuel had a gift for breeding horses, and his stock became known throughout the region for quality and temperament. Money was never abundant, but it was steady, and Samuel was able to provide his family with a comfortable life. He built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. He bought Olivia a piano, something she had mentioned missing from her childhood, and taught himself to tolerate her practicing scales in the evening. When Thomas was 3, Olivia told Samuel they were expecting again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter arrived in the summer of 1884, Olivia's labor was mercifully shorter. They named her Margaret, after Samuel's mother, and called her Maggie. Where Thomas was serious and thoughtful even as a small child, Maggie was all fire and spirit. She toddled after her father from the moment she could walk, insisting on going to the barn with him, on helping with the horses, on being involved in everything that happened on the ranch. "She is going to be a handful," Olivia said, watching 3-year-old Maggie attempt to climb onto a horse that was easily 10 times her size. "She gets it from her mother," Samuel said, scooping his daughter up and placing her safely on the ground. "I was never that wild," Olivia protested. "No, but you have that same determination, that same refusal to let anyone tell you what you can and cannot do. It is one of the things I love most about you." Life settled into a rhythm, the years passing in a blur of small moments that added up to a beautiful whole. Thomas started school in town, proving to have inherited his mother's love of learning. Maggie resisted any attempt at formal education, but she could ride a horse better than most grown men by the time she was 7. Samuel's ranch continued to prosper. Olivia's uncle Thomas passed peacefully in his sleep in 1886, leaving the general store to Olivia, who hired a manager to run it while she focused on her family. Through it all, Samuel and Olivia maintained their ritual. Every afternoon when the weather was good, they would walk out to the oak tree. Sometimes they brought the children, who would play in the grass while Olivia read. Sometimes it was just the 2 of them, stealing an hour alone together in the midst of their busy lives. The tree had become a symbol of their love, a place where their story had begun and continued to unfold. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked one afternoon in the fall of 1888. They were alone, the children in school, lying on the blanket beneath the oak and watching clouds drift across the sky. "Marrying me, living out here instead of in town, all of it." Olivia turned to look at him, genuine surprise in her eyes. "How could you even ask that?" "Samuel, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built is more than I ever dreamed possible." "You gave up a lot," Samuel said. "You could have married the banker's son, could have had a big house in town, social standing, all the things women are supposed to want." "I do not want those things," Olivia said firmly. "I never did. I want this. I want you. I want our children and our home, and yes, even the mud and the endless laundry and the chickens that keep escaping the coop. This is real, Samuel. This matters. Those other things are just window dressing." "I love you," Samuel said, pulling her close. More now than the day I married you, if that is even possible." "It is possible," Olivia said, "because I feel the same way." They were still lying there, wrapped in each other's arms when the children came running from school, Thomas trying to explain some mathematical concept he had learned while Maggie complained about having to sit still all day. Samuel and Olivia sat up, making room for the children on the blanket, and Olivia pulled out the book she had brought. "What are we reading today?" Thomas asked. At 8 years old, he was already working his way through his mother's collection, though his tastes ran more to adventure stories than the domestic novels Olivia favored. "I thought we might try something new," Olivia said. "Treasure Island. What do you think?" Both children cheered, and Samuel smiled, watching his wife begin to read, her voice animated as she brought the story to life. Maggie was soon caught up in the tale, her eyes wide. Thomas listened intently, already no doubt planning to read ahead when they got home. And Samuel sat there, his family around him, beneath the tree where it had all begun, and thought that he was the luckiest man alive. The years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man who surprised everyone by deciding to become a teacher rather than taking over the ranch. Samuel was disappointed at first, but Olivia reminded him that they needed to let their children find their own paths, just as they had found theirs. Maggie, true to form, announced at 16 that she intended to run the ranch herself. She had been working alongside her father for years, learning everything there was to know about breeding horses, managing land, running a business. Samuel could not have been prouder. In 1895, when Samuel was 43 and Olivia 40, they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. The children, now 14 and 11, had planned a surprise party, inviting half the town to the ranch. Samuel and Olivia stood together, accepting congratulations and good wishes, and Samuel marveled at how fast the years had gone. "Remember when I proposed?" he said to Olivia as they danced together in the barn that had been decorated for the occasion. "How could I forget? You interrupted me in the middle of a chapter." "You never did finish that chapter that day," Samuel said. "I finished it that night," Olivia reminded him, "after we were married. You asked me to read it to you." "Best chapter I ever heard," Samuel said. "Best proposal I ever received," Olivia countered, and they both laughed. That night, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Samuel and Olivia walked out to the oak tree. It was a warm summer night, the stars brilliant overhead, and they lay on the blanket looking up at the sky. "If you could go back," Samuel said, "to that day when I found you reading under this tree, would you change anything?" "Not a single thing," Olivia said without hesitation. "Well, maybe I would have looked up sooner, noticed you standing there, though I suppose you were quite patient waiting for me to notice." "I could have waited forever," Samuel said. "You were worth waiting for." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of the spring. "I have been thinking," Olivia said finally, "about writing." "Writing what?" "Our story. Not for publication or anything grand like that. Just for us, for the children, for our grandchildren someday. So they know how it all began. So they know that real love exists, that it is worth waiting for and fighting for and choosing every single day." "I think that is a wonderful idea," Samuel said. "Though I am not sure my part of the story is very interesting. I just found a beautiful woman reading under my tree and fell in love with her." "And proposed before I finished the chapter," Olivia added. "And proposed before you finished the chapter," Samuel agreed. Olivia did write their story, filling page after page with her neat handwriting, chronicling everything from that first meeting to their wedding to the births of their children and all the small moments in between. She wrote about the challenges they had faced, the joys they had shared, the love that had sustained them through everything. When she finished, she put the pages in a leather-bound journal and placed it on the shelf with all her other books. "Our story," she told Samuel, showing him the completed journal. "Right there with all the great love stories of literature, though I think ours is better because it is real." Thomas married at 23, a lovely young woman who taught at the school where he had taken a position. They had 2 children, and Thomas proved to be as devoted a father as Samuel had been. He brought his family to the ranch every Sunday for dinner, and Samuel loved watching his grandchildren play in the same fields where he and Olivia had raised their own children. Maggie took over management of the ranch when Samuel turned 50, insisting that he had earned a rest. He still worked, of course, because he could not imagine not working, but Maggie handled the business side of things with a skill that impressed even her father. She married late, at 30, to a neighboring rancher, and their union merged 2 properties into one of the largest holdings in the area. Samuel and Olivia moved into the smaller house that Samuel's father had originally built, the one where Samuel had grown up. It was strange at first, being back in that little building, but Olivia made it cozy, and Samuel found he appreciated the simplicity of it. They had raised their family, built their legacy. Now they could enjoy the quieter years together. Every afternoon they still walked to the oak tree. Both of them moved slower now, Samuel with a slight limp from an old injury and Olivia with joints that ached in the cold, but they made the walk regardless of the weather. Olivia still read, though her eyes were not as sharp as they once were, and she sometimes needed Samuel to read to her instead. "I never thought I would enjoy reading aloud," Samuel said one afternoon in 1910 when they were both 58, "but I find I quite like it." "You have a good reading voice," Olivia said. "Strong and steady, very comforting." "What are we reading today?" Samuel asked, though he already knew. They were working their way through all of Olivia's favorite books again, revisiting the stories they had shared over the years. "Middlemark," Olivia said. "Where it all started. Well, where it started for me anyway." "And for us," Samuel said, opening the book. He read for an hour, his voice rising and falling with the narrative, and when he paused, he looked over to find Olivia had fallen asleep, her head resting against the tree trunk, a peaceful expression on her face. He watched her for a moment, this woman who had given him everything, who had made his life immeasurably richer just by being in it. Then he set the book aside, placed his coat over her shoulders, and settled back to keep watch while she slept. When Olivia woke, the sun was lower in the sky and Samuel was still there, waiting patiently, just as he had waited that very first day. "Did I miss much?" she asked, blinking sleepily. "Nothing that cannot be recounted," Samuel said, "but I think we should head back. It is getting cold and I do not want you to catch a chill." They walked back slowly, arm in arm, and as they reached the house, Olivia stopped and looked back at the oak tree, visible in the distance. "That tree has been the witness to our entire lives together," she said. "Everything that matters happened there or started there or was shared there." "Then we should make sure it is taken care of," Samuel said. "I will ask Thomas and Maggie to make sure it is protected always. Our tree, the place where our story began." Both children readily agreed, and a family tradition was born. The oak tree became a sacred place for the Kane family, and as the years passed and the family grew, it became a gathering spot for picnics and celebrations, for quiet moments of reflection and joyful reunions. Samuel and Olivia celebrated their golden wedding anniversary in 1928. They were both 76 years old, and half the town turned out for the party that Maggie and Thomas organized. Samuel and Olivia sat in chairs of honor, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and accepted congratulations from people whose own parents had attended their wedding all those years ago. 50 years, Olivia marveled that night as they prepared for bed. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like it all happened yesterday. I would do it all again, Samuel said. Every single moment, even the hard parts, Olivia agreed. They still walked to the oak tree when the weather permitted, though they moved very slowly now, often stopping to rest. The children and grandchildren offered to drive them out in the automobile that Maggie owned, but both Samuel and Olivia insisted on walking. The journey was as important as the destination, they said. One afternoon in the spring of 1932, when they were both 80 years old, they made their walk to the tree. Olivia brought her journal, the one where she had written their story, and she read passages aloud while Samuel listened. "Do you think we did it right?" she asked when she had finished. "Do you think we built a good life?" Samuel looked around at the ranch that stretched in all directions, thought about their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, thought about the 54 years they had spent together, loving each other through every season of life. "I think we did it perfectly," he said. "Not without mistakes, not without challenges, but with love, always with love." Olivia reached for his hand, her fingers thin and spotted with age but still fitting perfectly in his. "I love you, Samuel Kane," she said. "I have loved you since the day you asked what I was reading instead of ordering me off your land. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you, Olivia Danvers Kane," Samuel replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, the very best." They sat together under the oak tree until the sun began to set, then walked home hand in hand, still together, still in love, after all these years. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, in the early summer of 1934. Olivia found him in the morning, his face peaceful, his hand still reaching for hers across the bed. She did not cry, not at first. She simply sat beside him, holding his hand, thanking him for 56 years of love and partnership. The funeral was large, befitting a man who had been a pillar of the community for decades. But afterward, when everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Olivia asked Thomas to drive her out to the oak tree. She sat there for hours, reading from the journal she had written so many years ago, remembering every moment of their life together. Olivia lived for 3 more years, surrounded by her loving family but missing Samuel with every breath. She spent her days reading, working in the garden, playing with her great-grandchildren. But every afternoon she made the journey to the oak tree, and more than one family member swore they saw her talking to someone who was not there, smiling as if Samuel was right beside her. She died on a crisp December morning in 1937, 85 years old, with her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed. Her last words were, "I am coming, my love. Wait for me under our tree." They buried her next to Samuel in the cemetery in Angels Camp, but the family also placed a memorial marker under the oak tree, a simple stone that read, "Here began the greatest love story ever told. Samuel and Olivia Kane together forever." The tree continued to stand for generations, a living monument to the love between Samuel and Olivia. Their descendants protected it fiercely, making sure it was never cut down, that the land around it was never developed. Family reunions were held there every year, and countless Kane children learned to read sitting beneath its branches, just as Olivia had done so long ago. The journal Olivia had written became a treasured family heirloom, passed down through the generations. Young couples in the family would read it before their own weddings, drawing inspiration from the love story of Samuel and Olivia. The story of how Samuel had proposed before Olivia finished her chapter became family legend, told and retold until everyone knew it by heart. Thomas's granddaughter, herself named Olivia after her great-grandmother, got married under the oak tree in 1965. She wore her great-grandmother's wedding ring and carried a bouquet of wildflowers like the one Samuel had picked for Olivia all those years ago. As she stood beneath the tree, exchanging vows with her own true love, she felt a strange sense of peace, as if her great-grandparents were there, giving their blessing. Maggie's great-grandson took over the ranch in 1980, the fifth generation to do so. He was a historian as well as a rancher, and he became fascinated with the story of Samuel and Olivia. He tracked down newspaper articles from their wedding, interviewed elderly residents of Angel's Camp who remembered them, collected photographs and letters. He created an archive of their lives, wanting to preserve their story for future generations. On what would have been Samuel and Olivia's 150th wedding anniversary in 2028, the family gathered under the oak tree for a massive reunion. There were over 200 descendants present, spread across 6 generations, all of them there because Samuel Cain had found a woman reading under his tree one September afternoon in 1878 and had the courage to speak to her, to love her, to build a life with her. The oldest member of the family present, Samuel and Olivia's great-great-great-granddaughter, who was herself 93, stood beneath the tree and read from the original journal, her voice wavering but strong. Some people believe in love at first sight. I'm not sure I did before I met Samuel. But I know now that it exists because I felt it that first day when he asked what I was reading. I felt it in the way he looked at me, in the kindness of his offer to let me continue reading under his tree. And I felt it even more when he proposed before I could finish my chapter. So eager was he to begin our life together. We had 56 years together, and it was not nearly enough. I would have wanted 1,000 more, but I am grateful for every single day we had, every single moment. He was my great love, my best friend, my partner in all things. And I know that wherever he is now, he is waiting for me under our tree, ready to continue our story. As the family gathered beneath the oak tree, sharing food and stories and laughter, the tree itself stood strong and steady, its branches spreading wide to shelter all of them. Birds nested in its boughs, children climbed its trunk, lovers carved their initials into its bark, just as Samuel had carved his and Olivia's so long ago. And if you looked closely, on certain quiet afternoons when the light was just right, you might see 2 figures sitting beneath the tree. An older man with kind eyes and work-worn hands, and a woman with honey-colored eyes and a book in her lap. You might hear her reading aloud, her voice full of passion and intelligence, and you might hear him laugh, that deep, rumbling laugh of a man completely content. You might see them reach for each other's hands, see them smile at each other with a love that time and even death could not diminish. The ranch continued to thrive, the family continued to grow, and the oak tree continued to stand, a testament to the power of love, to the beauty of a life well lived, to the simple truth that sometimes the greatest stories are the ones we write ourselves, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And it all began because Samuel Cain found a woman reading under his tree, fell in love with her in that instant, and proposed before she could finish her chapter, too eager to begin their happily ever after to wait one moment more. It was impulsive and romantic and perfectly right, just like everything else in their lives together. They had built something beautiful, something lasting, something that echoed down through the generations. Their love story became the foundation upon which all the other stories in their family were built. It set the standard for what love could be when it was true and deep and committed. It showed that real love was not about grand gestures alone, but about showing up every day, about choosing each other again and again, about building a life together brick by brick, moment by moment. The tree stood as a reminder that the best things in life often come when we least expect them, in the quiet moments when we are simply being ourselves, doing the things we love. Olivia had not been looking for love that day when she settled under the tree with her book. Samuel had not been looking for love when he rode out to check his property. But they had found each other anyway, and they had been brave enough to recognize what they had found and hold onto it with both hands. As the sun set on that anniversary gathering, the family slowly dispersed, heading back to their homes and their lives, carrying with them the story of Samuel and Olivia, letting it inform their own choices, their own relationships, their own understanding of what it meant to truly love someone. And the oak tree remained, solid and enduring, waiting for the next afternoon when someone would come to sit in its shade. Perhaps with a book, perhaps with a loved one, perhaps simply to remember and to dream, and to believe in the kind of love that lasts forever.